There was once a man named Charles Blondin, a tightrope walker who did incredible aerial feats. All over Paris, he would appear higher and higher up at different venues at an appointed time, and he would climb up even to higher heights with his tightrope act. Then he had succeeding acts. He would do it blindfolded. Then he would go across the tightrope blindfolded while pushing a wheelbarrow. What was next? And so an American promoter wrote about this in the papers and wrote a letter to the tightrope walker saying, Blondin, I essentially don't believe that you can do this, but I'm willing to make you an offer. And he offered him a very substantial sum of money, his transportation fees, everything. He said, I would like you, and I am challenging you to do this act across Niagara Falls. And so Blondin's great fame came on September 14, 1860, when he became the first person to cross Niagara Falls on a tightrope stretched 1,100 feet, over a quarter of a mile across Niagara Falls. People from both Canada and America came from miles away to see this incredible feat. There he is. He walked across 160 feet above the falls. He did it several times, each time with a different daring feat. Once he did it in a sack. Another time he did it on stilts. He did it in a bicycle, in the dark. He did it blindfolded. And one time, he even carried a small stove. There he is. And he cooked an omelet in the middle of the road. And so a large crowd gathered, and this buzz of excitement went all along both sides of the riverbank. The crowd, they oohed and they awed at Blondin carefully walking across one dangerous step after another, pushing a wheelbarrow with a sack of potatoes. And upon reaching the other side, the crowd's applause grew louder and louder as you could hear it over, they said, over the sound of the falls. And at one point then he asked for the audience's participation. Rather, just one person. He suddenly stopped, addressed the audience. He said, do you believe that I can carry a person across Niagara Falls in a wheelbarrow? Well, the crowd was very enthusiastic. They said, well, of course you can do it. Of course you can. Look at this amazing guy. He can do that. We believe. Okay, said Blondin. Who wants to get in the wheelbarrow? As far as Blondin and the story goes, no one did it that day. Two other versions of the story. There's several versions of this out you can look up. The claim that Blondin asked the American promoter, and then he asked a member of the British royal family if they would get into the wheelbarrow, visiting at the time. They didn't. Still, another one has his mother getting into the wheelbarrow, whereupon they made a round trip and cooked an omelet. This unique story illustrates a real-life picture of what faith might actually be. Here in the midst of a crowd, watching these daring feats, it illustrates human nature when it comes to acting in faith. What is it we live by? People said they believed, but common sense, for better or for worse, intervened when people were asked to get into that wheelbarrow. The word believe in Greek means to live by. To live by. It's a story that might make us think then about what it is that we live by. What do we live by? Is it okay that we can believe with our own eyes that incredible things certainly can happen? Have we been witness in our lives to the fact that very strange and wondrous things have happened, but still refuse to get into the wheelbarrow when everything is on the line because, well, any number of reasons that we don't do it. Jesus asked some pretty difficult questions and demands some pretty difficult things of his disciples. Those first 12 right on down to today. Give away your possessions. Go home today after church. I'm preaching the Bible here. Go home today. Give away all your possessions. I'm not doing it. But that's what Jesus asks us to do. Take up your cross. Follow me until your own life is in danger. And remember, only one disciple did not die a gruesome, terrible death. And that would be the beloved disciple. And John, supposedly, I visited his grave, I don't know if he's there, rests in peace in Ephesus in Turkey. It's no wonder that the disciples asked for more faith, seeing the growing resistance to their leader. They don't feel up to the tasks that he has set out for them. The challenges are just incredibly too much, and the world around them is growing more and more dangerous by the day. And so look what it is that we are facing today. There's a shooting. It used to be a shooting a month has now become a shooting a week, and it appears now that it's a shooting a day. We got home late last night and heard helicopters not too many miles from our house, and found that another African-American man had been killed by law enforcement. And there was another shooting nearby as I left to get here yesterday. And then this election cycle has left us more polarized than ever. And we know that whatever the outcome of the election in November, the problems that have brought us to here will not be solved. In fact, they may be exacerbated. Like the disciples, we feel insufficient to the tasks at hand. And I suspect that a lot of us feel the same way, like we need some more faith just to get through, just to make a difference. Preaching professor David Lowes writes, but then something interesting happens, because when the disciples recognize their need and ask him for help, for more faith, you'd think Jesus would both welcome and grant their request, but he doesn't. Instead, he almost seems to rebuke them. If you had even a speck of faith, he begins, implying that they don't even have the actual amount of faith that could be found in a mustard seed. What kind of way is that to respond to the disciples' earnest and even heartfelt question? When we look at this ministry of his, it seems that throughout it all, Jesus' idea of faith is out on the streets. Simply the willingness to do what it is that needs to get done. Lowes says, faith is not, in other words, some kind of scarce resource that needs to be saved, spent, added to, and all the rest. And he says, moreover, faith isn't always heroic. Indeed, it usually isn't, but instead is simply and humbly doing what needs to be done, big or small, great or mundane, just because it needs to get done. So what is faith to you then? What does faith, or having faith, mean to you today? Is faith a noun, or is faith a verb? Is it something that you profess in words, over and over, or ask others to profess? Or is it present and seen in your core because of the simple, little things you do to lift up this hurting world? In the second letter of Timothy, Paul is writing through time to Timothy, by which I mean that Paul was probably long dead by the time this letter was written. Someone was writing in his hand. But these pastoral epistles, as they're called, addressed issues that were surfacing in the early church as it was beginning to come together and gain form and structure. So it was more like WWPS, what would Paul say? And they were writing it down. Well, this might be rather close to what Paul might have said had he lived this long. He reminds Timothy that through the saints that have gone before him, his grandmother Lois, his mother Eunice, that sincere faith does live in him. And for this reason, I remind you, he says, to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. Doubts do not make us unbelievers. In fact, doubts can strengthen us because of the way they cause us to come together in a community to wrestle with this faith story. And you must admit, it's a remarkable story. Faith is shown to reside wherever the small, unnoticed things are done to lift up each other and this world around us. And so it might not be the kind of faith that causes you to jump into a wheelbarrow whenever someone in orange and yellow tights promises to get you over Niagara Falls on a tightrope. And good for you. Mustard seed or not, it might be the faith that grows with the spirit of power and love as we go about being this particular place at such a time as this. Paul talks back to the church, as he might be talking to us today, to say that spirit is alive in your church. So form a sense of community in your church. Make it a safe space as much as one can call anything a safe space these days. Make it a place for people who have felt marginalized. Provide outreach for the community that is around us. Provide opportunities for learning and places from which justice can be done. Even more locally, walk in the crop walk. Come to the Boy Scouts breakfast, even if it's at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, Matt. Visit a detainee. Sit with someone who might need to talk. Volunteer. Bring supper to someone who's having a hard time. Pray for a neighbor. They're all acts of faith. These are the ways in which the mustard seed can grow. And if you want to help from the comfort of your chair today is our Neighbors in Need offering, and this is something you can read about more in the insert in your bulletin, but it's been a part of our tradition for untold years now. These are the everyday and the ordinary, sacred and important things. Once you see that they do have a significance, you have renewed energy to have even more. Because look at what the headlines are telling us today. More children being killed in Syria. News of more shootings, of more injustices, less trust between nations, and a soulless culture of hate and ISIS. It can seem today, just turning on the news, like there is no hope. And David Lowe says, yet all around us are signs of hope, of God through us continuing to love and care for this world, even and especially through the simple, ordinary, even mundane acts of faithfulness our people are already doing in our churches. And that contrary to how it may feel at times, you, all of you, are so totally enough. Your faith is more than adequate for the tasks that are at hand. And so the season of saints begins with Communion Sunday, and now today with World Communion Sunday. It's a time to celebrate our global connections as Christians with others all around this world. And today, when we remember Jesus' words about faith being even as small as a mustard seed, we remember our connections through this world as churches everywhere come together and celebrate and sing in this communion service, knowing that we do this in solidarity all across the globe, everywhere. There are breads up here today, Michi brought, all over the globe, reminding us that this morning a very special table has been set for us. And so come, for all is prepared. This is an open table. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here. I'm going to ask Reverend Steve if he would join us for communion this morning.